Your phone buzzes. It's the group chat, the one from college you never muted. Someone just dropped a screenshot of their Vanguard account. 7 figures. The reactions pour in. Fire emojis. Bro, you're set. Teach me your ways. You close the notification. You set your phone face down on the desk. Because here's what actually happened in your chest just now. It wasn't admiration. It wasn't even envy exactly. It was something quieter and more corrosive, a slow, cold certainty that the train left and you weren't on it. You're 40, or close enough. And the mental math you're running right now in real time is grim. The retirement account that you keep meaning to look at. The credit card you've been managing for 3 years. The savings plan that exists mostly as a voice note you recorded to yourself in January and never played back. You know you should be further along. You're just not sure how far behind you actually are, and some part of you is afraid to find out. Here's what I want you to hear before we go any further. That screenshot? That person's story is not what you think it is. We're going to come back to that. But more importantly, the gap you're imagining between where you are and where you need to be is almost certainly not what you think it is either. Most of what you believe about money at 40, the benchmarks, the rules, the timelines, was built for an economy that dissolved 2 decades ago. You're grading yourself on a curve that was never designed for your reality. Today, I'm going to give you the actual picture. Real data. Honest benchmarks adjusted, and then I'm going to show you step by step why your 40s may be the single most powerful financial decade available to you. Not despite starting late, but because of how the math actually works. There's a specific concept I'll introduce around the midpoint of this video. It's called contribution intensity. Once you see what it does to a 25-year compound window, the way you think about catching up will permanently shift. Let's start with the number everyone gets wrong. 1. The benchmark problem. Financial advisors have a favorite stat they love to drop on people in their late 30s. By age 40, you should have saved 3 times your annual salary for retirement. If you earn $80,000, that's $240,000. If you earn $100,000, that's $300,000. It sounds authoritative. It gets printed in every year-end financial checklist article from October through December. And for most people, it lands like a verdict. But where does that number come from? It comes from modeling a retirement at 67, drawing down a portfolio that replaced a comfortable but not extravagant lifestyle, using average historical market returns. It assumes you started contributing meaningfully in your mid-20s, maintained steady employment, never had a major financial disruption, and lived in a market where housing costs, healthcare, and education didn't outpace wages for 30 consecutive years. In other words, it assumes a life that statistically almost no one actually lived. The Federal Reserve Survey of Consumer Finances, the most rigorous household wealth data collected in the United States, found that the median retirement savings for Americans between the ages of 35 and 44 sits at roughly $45,000. Not $240,000. Not even $100,000. $45,000. That is the actual midpoint. Half of Americans in this age group have less than that saved. So if you're sitting somewhere between $30,000 and $80,000, you're not failing by any realistic measure. You're near the average, and average, while not a goal, at least tells you something true about the landscape. The 3-time salary benchmark isn't a neutral measurement. It's a product. Financial institutions profit from the anxiety it generates. Feeling behind makes people buy products, chase returns, and pay advisory fees. The benchmark was calibrated to make almost everyone feel inadequate. That said, and this matters, average is not a destination. Average in America means working until your late 60s, hoping Social Security is solvent, and retiring with a budget that doesn't allow much room for error. Average is survivable. It's not comfortable. It's not what any of us actually want. So we need a different frame entirely. Not the benchmark designed to sell you something. Not the average that just barely keeps the lights on. The benchmark that reflects what is genuinely achievable given the economic reality most of us are actually navigating. 2. The real numbers. Let's replace the myth with something useful. A realistic, meaningful benchmark for retirement savings at 40 is 1.5 to 2 times your annual salary. If you earn $75,000, the target range is $112,000 to $150,000 in retirement accounts. That keeps you on a credible path toward a dignified retirement, provided you continue contributing through your peak earning years in your 40s and 50s. Here's why that number carries more weight than it might seem at first glance. If you're 40 today with $100,000 already invested and you never contribute another dollar, that money grows to approximately $685,000 by the time you're 65 at a historically reasonable 8% average annual return. That alone doesn't make retirement easy, but it's a real foundation. Add continued contributions through your working years, and you're building something substantial. The people who understand this stop trying to catch up to an imaginary finish line and start building momentum from wherever they actually stand. Beyond retirement savings, there are 3 other benchmarks that matter equally at 40, and most financial content skips 2 of them entirely. The first is liquidity. You need 3 to 6 months of core living expenses sitting in an account you can access within 48 hours. Core expenses mean the non-negotiables: housing, utilities, food, transportation, insurance. For most households, this is somewhere between $15,000 and $30,000. This money has one job. It buys you time when something breaks: a job loss, a medical bill, a car that stops working. It is not an investment account. It is not a travel fund. It is the wall between you and financial crisis. The second is debt. By 40, all high-interest consumer debt should be gone. Credit cards charging 20% or more, personal loans, store financing. These should be cleared. The only debt that belongs in your financial picture at this stage is a mortgage and, at most, a single auto loan at a rate below 6%. If you're still rolling a credit card balance month to month at 40, that is the first thing that needs your attention. Not investing. Not budgeting apps. The debt. Credit card interest compounds against you with the same force that index fund returns compound for you. You cannot build wealth in one direction while losing ground in the other. The third is income trajectory. Bureau of Labor Statistics data consistently shows that most Americans hit their peak earning window between 45 and 54. By 40, your income should be meaningfully higher than it was at 30, at minimum 25 to 30% more in inflation-adjusted terms. If that's not true, your career is the problem worth solving before anything else. Every dollar you add to your income, directed intentionally, compounds into a retirement outcome that no savings rate on a flat salary can replicate. 03. The 4 benchmarks decoded. Let me make this concrete. 4 benchmarks. A clear-eyed look at each one. Benchmark 1. Retirement savings. Target is 1.5 to 2 times your annual salary. If you're below that, you're not in crisis, you're in catch-up mode, which is a position with a very clear playbook. If you're above it, you're ahead of most Americans, and you have one job: don't let lifestyle expansion erode the lead. Benchmark 2. Liquid emergency fund. 3 to 6 months of essential expenses in a high-yield savings account, not a checking account bleeding 0.01% interest, not a brokerage account exposed to market swings. Liquid. Stable. Accessible. If you don't have this, it's not a luxury you'll get to eventually. It's a structural vulnerability that will eventually cost you more than whatever you'd earn by investing those dollars instead. Benchmark 3. Debt profile. By 40, your debt picture should be clean. High-interest consumer debt at 0. Student loans either paid off or on a defined, final payoff timeline, not just "I'm making minimum payments." Mortgage. Acceptable. Single car payment at a reasonable rate. Acceptable. Everything else, gone. The household that reaches 45 with a clean debt profile and decent savings will consistently outperform the household with twice the investments but a $15,000 credit card balance. The math is not subtle. Benchmark 4. Income momentum. Are you earning more than you were 5 years ago in real terms? Is your income likely to continue growing? Do you have at least one skill, certification, or domain of expertise that the market pays a premium for? If you're a generalist in a field that's getting commoditized, this is the decade to fix that. Specialists attract opportunities. Generalists compete for them. The difference in lifetime earnings between someone who develops genuine expertise in a high-demand niche and someone who stays broadly competent can easily exceed $500,000 over a career. These four benchmarks interact. Weak income limits your ability to build savings. Lingering debt drains the resources that could become investments. No emergency fund means one bad month sends you back to the credit card. They are a system, not a checklist. Address them as a system. Quick pause. If this is landing differently than the usual money content you've seen, hit subscribe. Every week I break down how wealth actually works. No hype, no products to sell, just the real mechanics. Now stick with me because what comes next is the part most people never hear. Why being 40 with less than you expected might actually be a structural advantage. 04. Why 40 is actually an advantage. Here's what the conventional financial narrative gets completely backwards. It treats late starters as people in damage control, running behind, trying to undo the cost of lost time. That framing is not just discouraging. It's mathematically incorrect. The concept that changes this picture is contribution intensity. Time in the market matters. But the amount you're contributing while that time passes matters more than most people realize, especially over a 25-year window. Consider two people. The first starts investing at 25, putting in $250 a month consistently until 65. At 8% average returns, they retire with approximately $876,000. 40 years of discipline. Admirable. The second doesn't start until 40, but contributes $1,500 a month, a number that's genuinely achievable at a mid-career salary. Same 8% return. Same end date at 65. They retire with approximately $1.37 million. The late starter wins. Not because of some trick or loophole, because they had more income to deploy, more financial clarity to direct it, and enough runway for compounding to still do significant work. This is contribution intensity. And it's exactly why your 40s are not the consolation prize of personal finance. They're often the main event. 3 things converge at 40 that simply aren't available at 25. First, earnings are higher. The average 40-year-old earns substantially more than they did at 25. More income means more capacity to invest, not by trimming lattes, but by directing genuinely meaningful dollars toward wealth building. Second, the expensive phase of early adulthood is mostly over. The years of furnishing apartments, building a work wardrobe from scratch, funding every social event because you're new to the city, that spending naturally slows. Life gets quieter in ways that free up real money if you capture it intentionally rather than letting lifestyle inflation absorb it. Third, and perhaps most importantly, you understand money in a way your 25-year-old self simply didn't. You've watched a market correction and kept your nerve, or learned a painful lesson when you didn't. You know what financial stress actually feels like, which gives you real motivation that no YouTube video can manufacture at 24. Emotional maturity about money is underrated. It prevents the panic selling, the get-rich-quick detours, and the lifestyle inflation that quietly destroys wealth for smart people who should know better. The question isn't whether you can catch up. The question is whether you're willing to deploy what 40 actually gives you. 05. The case study. Dara's reset. Let me introduce you to Dara. She's a composite, built from the patterns I see repeatedly in people who successfully execute a financial reset in their 40s. Dara turned 41 with $18,000 in a 401k she'd stopped thinking about, $11,000 in credit card debt across 2 cards, and a salary of $92,000 that felt like it should be enough, but somehow never was. She wasn't reckless. She'd just spent a decade saying yes to small things, subscriptions, nicer apartments, better cars, without ever doing a full accounting of what it all added up to. Every month ended roughly the same. Not broke, but not building anything either. The money moved and left no record of where it went. The reset happened in 5 phases. Phase 1, the honest audit. Dara spent one weekend pulling every bank and credit card statement from the past 3 months. She categorized every transaction, not to feel shame, but to see clearly. What she found surprised her. Recurring subscriptions she'd forgotten about. A meal delivery service she used twice a week out of habit rather than enjoyment. 3 separate monthly fees for apps she opened maybe once a month combined. Altogether, $290 a month in spending that was producing almost no value in her life. She canceled it in an afternoon. Then she called her auto insurer, spent 20 minutes on the phone, and found $80 a month in coverage she'd been paying for on a car she'd owned outright for 2 years. In 2 days, without changing her lifestyle in any meaningful way, Dara had freed up $370 a month. Phase 2. Clearing the debt. She redirected every freed-up dollar at her credit card with the highest interest rate. She didn't open an investment account during this phase. She didn't add to her 401k beyond the employer match. She focused entirely on eliminating the guaranteed 22% loss that her credit card balance represented. 14 months later, both cards were at zero. That $370 in freed-up spending was now joined by $280 she'd been paying in minimum payments, $650 a month, fully redirected. Phase 3. Building the floor. Before Dara invested aggressively, she spent 4 months building a real emergency fund, $14,000, covering just over 3 months of her essential expenses. This step feels like a detour. It isn't. Without a buffer, the first unexpected expense sends you back to the credit card. The cycle resets. The emergency fund breaks the cycle permanently. They're often the ones who decided their life was good enough at some point and stopped letting the goalpost move. Let's go back to that group chat. The person who posted the Vanguard screenshot. You assumed they'd been doing everything right since their 20s, that they had some discipline or knowledge or luck you didn't have access to. Here's what's more likely true. They had 1 year of aggressive saving that moved the number dramatically. Or they received money they haven't mentioned. Or the screenshot is the best thing in their financial picture right now, and everything else is messier than you'd guess. Or, and this is the one worth sitting with, they genuinely did the work, and it's available to you too, just starting from today instead of 10 years ago. The median 40-year-old in America has $45,000 saved for retirement. The 3-time salary benchmark you've been measuring yourself against was designed to make you feel inadequate enough to buy something. The actual question is not where you are. It's whether the direction you're moving is correct and whether you're moving with enough speed. Someone at 40 with $40,000 saved and a 25% savings rate will overtake someone with $180,000 saved and a 4% savings rate within 10 years. Trajectory is the metric. Position is just the starting point. Your 40s are not a consolation decade. They're the decade where earning power peaks, expenses stabilize, and the window for contribution intensity is still wide open. The person who starts aggressively at 40 often ends up in a better position than the person who started passively at 25. That's not a motivational line. It's compound math applied honestly. One action. That's all that's required right now. Not a plan. Not a complete financial overhaul. One action in the next 48 hours. If you're carrying high-interest debt, open a balance transfer card with a 0% introductory rate today and move the balance. Stop the bleeding first. If you have no emergency fund, set up an automatic transfer, even $150 per paycheck, to a high-yield savings account. Automate it so it moves before you can spend it. If you have savings but you're not investing, log into your retirement account today and increase your contribution by 2%. Not next week. Today. Motion precedes motivation. Every person who has ever dramatically changed their financial life started with one specific action, not a complete system. 10 years from now, you'll either look back at this as the moment something shifted, or you'll still be putting your phone face down when the group chat buzzes. The benchmarks are just data. What you do with them is the only thing that matters. If this reframes something for you, share it with someone who needs a different way of looking at where they are. And subscribe. We do this every week. The real picture, no products, no panic. Leave a comment. What's the one financial move you've been putting off that you know you need to make?